Working the graveyard shift at the gas station on Route 66 was never glamorous, but it paid the bills. The nights were usually quiet, broken only by the occasional trucker stopping for fuel or coffee. But one night in particular stands out in my memory, a night that tested my sanity and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. It was a chilly autumn evening, the air crisp with the promise of winter. The gas station sat on the edge of town, surrounded by darkness and the eerie silence of the open highway. The dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I counted down the hours until sunrise. Around midnight, a lone car pulled into the station, a beat-up sedan sputtering on fumes. I stepped out of the warmth of the cashier's booth and approached the driver's side window. "Evening," I greeted with a tired smile. "Need some gas?" The driver, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, nodded silently. He seemed nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone or something to appear behind him. I filled up his tank while he stayed in the car, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the gas station's perimeter. As I replaced the nozzle and handed him the receipt, he muttered a quick thanks and sped off into the night, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. The next few hours passed slowly. I busied myself with restocking shelves and counting inventory, trying to shake off the odd encounter with a mysterious driver. But as the night wore on, a sense of dread settled over me, a feeling that I was being watched, monitored by unseen eyes in the shadows. Around 3 a.m., things took a darker turn. A loud crash echoed from the back of the gas station, followed by the clatter of metal shelves toppling over. My heart leaped into my throat as I grabbed the baseball bat kept behind the counter for emergencies. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty store. No response. I crept towards the source of the noise, bat raised defensively. The storeroom door swung open ominously, revealing a scene of chaos, shelves overturned, products strewn across the floor. Fear prickled at the back of my neck as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of an intruder. But the storeroom was empty, save for the lingering scent of gasoline and motor oil. I hesitated, torn between investigating further and calling the police. But before I could make a decision, a chill swept through the air, a cold so intense it made my breath catch in my throat. I turned towards the doorway, heart pounding, in sight, a figure standing just beyond the threshold. It was tall and shadowy, its form indistinct in the dim light. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized this was no ordinary intruder. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It simply stood there, watching me with eyes that gleamed in the darkness. I gripped the bat tighter, adrenaline coursing through me. "I'm calling the police," I warned, reaching for the phone on the counter. But as I dialed 911, the figure vanished into thin air, a swirl of shadows dissipating into nothingness. My hands trembled as I held the phone to my ear, heart racing with a mixture of fear and disbelief. 911, "What's your emergency?" A dispatcher's voice crackled through the line. I struggled to find my words, my mind reeling from the encounter. I think someone was here," I finally managed to say. "But they're gone now." The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way and stayed on the line until the police arrived. Officers swept the gas station and surrounding area, but found no trace of the intruder, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. They took my statement and checked the security footage, but it showed nothing out of the ordinary. No figure lurking in the shadows, no evidence of a break-in. I was left with more questions than answers. What had I seen that night? Was it a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion and stress? Or had I truly encountered something supernatural, a ghost, a specter from another realm? I quit my job at the gas station shortly after that night, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of lingering shadows that seemed to follow me wherever I went. The memory haunted me, a reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding, lurking in the darkness just beyond our perception. To this day, I avoid driving past the gas station on Route 66 at night. I've heard whispers from locals about strange occurrences there, unexplained noises, sightings of shadowy figures, and a pervasive feeling of unease. Some nights, when the wind howls and the darkness presses close, I wonder if I'll ever truly escape that night, or if the specter I encountered will find me again, reminding me that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some encounters better left forgotten in the shadows of memory. night shift at the gas station was never my first choice, but it paid the bills, and in a small town like ours, jobs weren't exactly abundant. The station sat at the edge of town, where the highway tapered off into winding country roads, and darkness seemed to swallow everything beyond the reach of the flickering streetlights. It was a Tuesday night, quiet and uneventful, just like most nights on the job. The occasional car would pull in for gas or snacks, but for the most part, I spent my time behind a counter, flipping through a magazine or browsing my phone to pass the time. Around midnight, when most of the town was asleep and even the crickets had gone quiet, a black sedan pulled into the station. It rolled to a stop at pump number 3, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a pair of piercing eyes. I glanced up from my phone, expecting to see a tired traveler or maybe a local on a late-night snack run. But when the driver's door swung open, I felt a shiver run down my spine. A man stepped out, tall and lean, wearing a tattered hoodie pulled low over his face. His movements were slow and deliberate, his steps hesitant, as if he were uncertain of his own footing. I couldn't see his face beneath the shadows of the hood, but something about his presence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I watched him through the security monitor as he approached the counter, his gait uneven, almost robotic. He didn't say a word as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, which he slid across the counter towards me. "Fill it up," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the fluorescent lights. I nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut as I took the bill and punched in the pump number. The transaction went smoothly enough, but the air in the station had turned thick with tension, as if a storm were brewing just beneath the surface. As I waited for the pump to finish, I stole a glance at the man. He was standing by the window, staring out into the darkness with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white against the backdrop of his dark hoodie. I cleared my throat, trying to break the silence. "Quiet night," I said, forcing a casual tone. The man didn't respond. He just continued to stare, his gaze unwavering. Unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. I glanced at the security monitor again, half expecting to see something, anything, that would explain the sense of dread creeping up my spine. But the parking lot was empty, save for the man and his sedan. The pump clicked off, signaling that the tank was full. I printed the receipt and slid it across the counter towards the man, who took it without a word. He turned to leave, his movements stiff and mechanical. "Hey, have a good night," I called after him, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. He paused in the doorway, his back still turned to me. For a moment, I thought he might say something, explain his strange behavior, but then he simply walked out into the night. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and leaned back against the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. The encounter had left me shaken, but I chalked it up to the late hour and my overactive imagination. Just as I started to relax, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the pumps. I jumped, my pulse racing as I rushed to the window to investigate. The man's sedan sat abandoned at pump number 3, its driver nowhere in sight. The nozzle dangled from the tank, spewing gasoline onto the pavement in a shimmering pool. Fear clenched my chest as I grabbed the fire extinguisher from behind the counter and rushed outside. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline, the fumes making my head swim as I approached the sedan. I circled the car cautiously, scanning the area for any sign of the man. But he was gone, vanished into the night without a trace. My hands shook as I shut off the pump and secured the nozzle back in its place. Back inside the station, I called 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation to the dispatcher on the line. They assured me that help was on the way and stayed on the line until the fire department arrived to clean up the spill. As I watched the firefighters work, a sense of unease settled over me once more. What had driven the man to abandon his car like that? And where had he gone? The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity as I waited for the police to arrive and take my statement. When they finally did, I recounted the events of the night, leaving nothing out, even the strange sense of dread that had lingered in the air. The officers searched the area thoroughly, but found no sign of the man or any explanation for his bizarre behavior. They took a copy of the security footage and promised to keep me updated on their investigation. Days passed without any news, and gradually, life at the gas station returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a harrowing experience. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the man's visit had been more than just a strange encounter. To this day, I wonder what he was running from. What had driven him to abandon his car and disappear into the night? And every time a car pulls into pump number 3, my heart skips a beat, a lingering reminder of the night that changed everything at the lonely gas station on the edge of town. It was a quiet night at the gas station, the kind where time seemed to stretch endlessly. The highway outside was deserted, with only the occasional flicker of headlights slicing through the darkness. I stood behind the counter, idly flipping through a magazine, trying to stay awake. The clock struck midnight, and I yawned, glancing out the window at the empty parking lot. The fluorescent lights hung softly above me, casting a sterile glow over the rows of snacks and drinks lining the shelves. Just as I started to doze off, a sudden dapping sound startled me. I looked up to see a figure standing outside the glass doors. It was a young man, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. He stood perfectly still, staring at me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, unsure whether to let him. Something about his presence felt off, but it was late and he could be in trouble. With a sigh, I pressed the button to unlock the door, the sound of the mechanism loud in the silence. The young man entered, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. He kept his head down, hands shook deep into the pockets of his jacket. I watched him warily as he made his way to the aisle with energy drinks, grabbing a can without looking at the label. "Long night?" I asked, attempting to break the tension. He glanced up briefly, his eyes dark and pondering. "Something like that," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not wanting to pry from him. As he approached the counter, I rang up his purchase, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. There was something about him that made my skin crawl, a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. "Would that be all?" I asked, handing him the receipt. He nodded, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond the glass doors. "Yeah, thanks," he mumbled, turning to leave. But as he reached for the door handle, a loud crash echoed from the back of the store. We both jumped, startled by the sudden noise. I exchanged a nervous glance with the young man before cautiously making my way towards the source of the sound, the storeroom. The door creaked open ominously, revealing a scene of chaos inside. Shelves had been overturned, boxes strewn across the floor in disarray. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of an intruder. "What the hell?" The young man breathed beside me, his voice trembling. I swallowed hard, reaching for the baseball bat we kept behind the counter for emergencies. With shaking hands, I led the way into the storeroom, heart racing as adrenaline surged through me. But there was no one there, no hiding place, no escape route. Just the lingering scent of gasoline and the unsettling feeling that we were being watched. "Maybe it was an animal," I suggested weakly, trying to rationalize the situation. The young man shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. "No animal could make a mess like this," he muttered, his voice barely audible. I nodded in reluctant agreement, my mind racing with possibilities. Had someone broken in, looking for cash or valuables? Or was it something else, something more sinister? We searched the storeroom thoroughly, but found no answers, no clues to explain the disturbance. I called the police, my hands trembling as I relayed the situation to the dispatcher on the line. They assured me that officers were on their way and stayed on the line until help arrived. When the police finally arrived, they took our statements and checked the security footage. But the cameras had malfunctioned, leaving us with no evidence of who or what had caused the chaos in the storeroom. As the officers left, promising to keep an eye on the area, I locked the gas station doors behind me. The young man had stayed with me throughout the ordeal, his presence offering some comfort in the face of uncertainty. "What do you think it was?" he asked quietly, his eyes darting nervously around the empty store. I shook my head, at a loss for words. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded in understanding, his expression grave. "I think I should go," he said suddenly, glancing towards the doors. I didn't argue. We said a hurried goodbye, and he disappeared into the night, leaving me alone once more. I spent the rest of the night on edge, jumping at every sound and shadow. The sense of unease lingered long after the police had gone, a reminder of the darkness that could lurk just beyond the safety of the gas station walls. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that something otherworldly visited us that night, a presence that defied explanation and left me questioning the limits of what I believed possible.